Hello and welcome to Miss Clark Reads to You. We are in Mitch Albom's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and we are on page 49. And our goal today, I always like to set a goal for how much I want to read, is I would like to get to the second person Eddie meets in heaven, which would be page 57. That's the beginning of the chapter, and then we'll pick up in our next reading session from there. With that, the blue man pulled Eddie close. Instantly, Eddie felt everything the blue man had felt in his life rushing into him, swimming in his body, the loneliness, the shame, the nervousness, the heart attack. It slid into Eddie like a drawer being closed. I just want to say before as I'm turning the page, I just love that simile, the closure simile, that Eddie's having closure and the blue man's having closure. I'm leaving, the blue man whispered in his ear. This step of heaven is over for me, but there are others for you to meet. Wait, Eddie said, pulling back. Just tell me one thing. Did I save the little girl at the pier? Did I save her? Then Blue Man did not answer, and Eddie slumped. Oh, then my death was a waste, just like my life. No life is a waste, the Blue Man said. The only time we waste is the time we spend thinking we are alone. He stepped back toward the gravesite and smiled, and as he did, his skin turned the loveliest shade of caramel, smooth and unblemished. It was, Eddie thought, the most perfect skin he'd ever seen. Wait! Yelled Eddie, but he was suddenly whisked into the air, away from the cemetery, soaring above the great gray ocean. Below him he saw the rooftops of old Ruby Pier, the spires, the turrets, the flags flapping in the breeze, and then it was gone. Sunday, 3 p.m. Back at the pier, the crowd stood silently around the wreckage of Freddie's free fall. The old women touched their throats. Mothers pulled their children away. Several burly men in tank tops slid to the front as if this were something they should handle. But once they got there, they too only looked on helpless. The sun baked down, sharpening the shadows, causing them to shield their eyes as if they were saluting. How bad is it? People whispered. From the back of the crowd, Dominguez burst through, his face red, his maintenance shirt drenched in sweat. He saw the carnage. Oh, no, Eddie, he moaned, grabbing his head. Security workers arrived. They pushed people back, but then they too fell into impotent postures, hands on their hips, waiting for the ambulances, as if all of them, the mothers, fathers, kids with their giant gulp soda cups, were too stunned to look and too stunned to leave. Death was at their feet as a carnival tune played over the park speakers. How bad is it? Sirens sounded. Men in uniforms arrived. Yellow tape was stretched around the area. The arcade booths pulled down their grates. The rides were closed indefinitely. Word spread across the beach of the bad thing that had happened, and by sunset, Ruby Pier was empty. Today is Eddie's birthday. From his bedroom, even with the door closed, Eddie can smell the beefsteak his mother is grilling with green peppers and sweet red onions, a strong woody odor that he loves. Eddie! She yells from the kitchen. Where are you? Everyone's here! He rolls off the bed and puts away the comic book. He's 17 today. Too old for such things, but he still enjoys the idea. Colorful heroes like the Phantom, fighting the bad guys, saving the world. He has given his collection to his school-age cousins from Romania who came to America a few months earlier. Eddie's family met them at the docks, and they moved into the bedroom that Eddie shared with his brother Joe. The cousins cannot speak English, but they like comic books. Anyhow, it gives Eddie an excuse to keep him around. There's the birthday boy, his mother crows when he rambles into the room. He wears a button-down white shirt, a blue tie, which pinches his muscular neck. A grunt of hellos and raised beer glasses come from the assembled visitors, family, friends, peer workers, and Eddie's father's playing cards in the corner in a small cloud of cigar smoke. Hey, Ma, guess what? Joe yells out. Eddie met a girl last night. Ooh, did he? Eddie feels a rush of blood. Yeah, said he's gonna marry her. Such a trap, Eddie says to Joe, and Joe ignores him. Yep, came into the room all goggle-eyed, and he said, Joe, I met the girl I'm gonna marry. Eddie seethes. I said shut it. What's her name, Eddie? Someone asks. Does she go to church? Eddie goes to his brother and socks him in the arm. Ah! Eddie, I told you to shut it. Joe blurts out. And he danced with her at the start. Whack! Ah! Shut up! Eddie, stop that. Even the Romanian cousins look up now, fighting, they understand, as the two brothers grab each other and flail away, clearing the couch until Eddie's father puts down his cigar and yells, Knock it off before I slap both yous. The brothers separate, panting and glaring. Some older relatives smile. One of the aunts whispers, You must really like this girl. Later, after the special steak has been eaten and the candles have been blown out and most of the guests have gone home, Eddie's mother turns on the radio. There's news about the war in Europe, and Eddie's father says something about lumber and copper wire being hard to get if things get worse, and that'll make maintenance of the park nearly impossible. Oh, such awful news, Eddie's mother says. Not at a birthday? She turns the dial with the small box until the small box offers music, an orchestra playing a swing melody, and she smiles and hums along, and then she comes over to Eddie, who is slouched in his chair, picking at the last pieces of cake, and she removes her apron, she folds it over a chair, and she lifts Eddie by the hands. Show me how you danced with your new friend, she says. Oh, Ma, come on. Eddie stands as if being led to his execution. His brother smirks, but his mother, with her pretty round face, keeps humming, stepping back and forth until Eddie falls into a dance step with her. She sings with the melody. And with you, with me, the stars and the moon, the da-da-da-da-da in June. They move around the living room until Eddie breaks down and laughs. He is already taller than his mom by a good 6 inches, yet she twirls him with ease. So, you like this girl? Eddie loses a step. It's all right. I'm happy for you. And they spin to the table, and Eddie's mother grabs Joe and pulls him up. Now you two dance, she says. With him? Ma! But she insists, and they relent, and soon Joe and Eddie are laughing and stumbling into each other. They join hands and move, swooping up and down in exaggerated circles. Around and around the table they go, to their mother's delight, as the clarinets lead the radio melody and the Romanian cousins clap along, and the final wisps of grilled steak evaporate into the party air. The second person Eddie meets in heaven. This is page 56. Eddie felt his feet touch ground. The sky was changing again from cobalt blue to charcoal gray, and Eddie was surrounded by the fallen trees and the blackened rubble. He grabbed his arms, shoulders, thighs, and calves. He felt stronger than before, but when he tried to touch his toes, he no longer could do so, and the limberness was gone. No more childish rubbery sensation. Every muscle he had was as tight as a piano wire. He looked around at the lifeless terrain. On a nearby hill lay a busted wagon and rotting bones of animal, and he felt a hot wind whip across his face. The sky exploded into a flaming yellow, and once again Eddie ran. He ran differently now. In the hard, measured step of a soldier, he heard thunder, something like thunder, explosions, or bomb blasts. And he instinctively fell to the ground, landed on his stomach, and pulled himself along by his forearms. The sky burst open and gushed rain, a thick brownish downpour. Eddie lowered his head and crawled along the mud, spitting away the dirty water that gathered around his lips. Finally, he felt his head brush against something solid. He looked up to see a rifle dug into the ground with a helmet sitting atop it and a set of dog tags hanging from the grip. Blinking through the rain, he fingered the dog tags, then scrambled backward wildly into a porous wall of stringy vines that hung from a massive banyan tree. He dove into their darkness, and he pulled his knees into a crouch. He tried to catch his breath. Fear had found him, even in heaven. The name on the dog tags was his. Young men go to war, sometimes because they have to, and sometimes because they want to. Always they feel they are supposed to. This comes from the sad, layered stories of life, which over the centuries have seen courage confused with picking up arms and cowardice confused with laying them down. When his country entered the war, Eddie woke up early one rainy morning, shaved, combed back his hair, and he enlisted. Others were fighting. He would, too. His mother did not want him to go. His father, when informed of the news, lit a cigarette and blew the smoke out slowly. When? Was all he asked. Since he'd never fired an actual rifle, Eddie began to practice at the shooting arcade at Ruby Pear. You paid a nickel and the machine hummed and you squeezed the trigger and the fired metal slugs at pictures of jungle animals, a lion, a giraffe. Eddie went every evening after running the brake levers at the Lil Folks Miniature Railway. Ruby Pier had added a number of new, smaller attractions because roller coasters, after the Depression, had become too expensive. The miniature railway was pretty much just that, the train cars, no higher than a grown man's thigh. Eddie, before enlisting, had been working to save money to study engineering. That was his goal. He wanted to build things, even if his brother Joe kept saying, "Come on, Eddie, you aren't smart enough for that." But once the war started, Pier business dropped, and most of Eddie's customers were now women, alone with children and their fathers gone to fight. Sometimes the children asked Eddie to lift them over his head, and when Eddie complied, he saw the mother's sad smiles. He guessed it was the right lift, but the wrong pair of arms. Soon Eddie figured he would join those distant men, and his life of greasing tracks and running brake levers would be over. War was his call to manhood. Maybe someone would miss him too. On one of those final nights, Eddie was bent over the small arcade rifle, firing with deep concentration. Pang! Pang! He tried to imagine actually shooting at the enemy. Pang! Would they make a noise when he shot them? Pang! Or would they just go down like the lions and giraffes? Pang! Pang! Practicing to kill, are you, lad? Mickey Shea was standing behind Eddie. His hair was the color of French vanilla ice cream, wet with sweat, and his face was red from whatever he'd been drinking. Eddie shrugged and returned to his shooting. Pang! Another hit. Pang! Another. Mickey grunted. Eddie wished Mickey would go away and let him work on his aim. He could feel the old drunk behind him. He could hear his labored breathing, the nasal hissing in and out like a bike tire being inflated by a pump. Eddie kept shooting. Suddenly, he felt a painful grip on his shoulder. "Listen to me, lad." Mickey's voice was a low growl. "War's no game. If there's a shot to be made, you make it, you hear? No guilt. No hesitation. You fire, and you don't think about who you're shooting or killing or why. You hear me? You want to come home again? You just fire. You don't think." And he squeezed even harder. "It's the thinking that gets you killed." Eddie turned and stared at Mickey. Mickey slapped him hard on the cheek, and Eddie instinctively raised his fist to retaliate. But Mickey belched and wobbled backward. Then he looked at Eddie as if he were going to cry. The mechanical gun stopped humming. Eddie's nickel was up. Young men go to war, sometimes because they have to, sometimes because they want to. A few days later, Eddie packed a duffel bag, and he left the pier behind. So I was, as I was reading, I was making a brain connection on the gorgeous similes that Mitch Albom writes. He could hear his labored breathing, the nasal hissing in and out like a bike tire being inflated by a pump. Shh, shh, shh. The bike tire being inflated. Shh, shh, shh. I think it's important that we read similes in other writing or figurative language, and then we try to incorporate that to make things more clear in our own writing. And so the drunk man's breathing sounds like this. So that's it for now. That's page 60, and I look forward to picking up on page 60 the next time I read to you. Have a really nice day. Thank you.